오직 청기 고방유토쇼. And let's do the four limitless contemplation. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semjin damje dewatang dewe jutang din pajuje dungal tang dungal jitang trawajuchik dungal mepe dewatam patang mindrawajuchik nering chaktang nitang drawe tangnum chimpo lane pajuchik. So today, I thought to myself, I've been giving you quite hard teaching. You know, not for a lot of you, it's easy to understand. For some of you, it's hard to understand. And Eid, I've got to say to you that it's marvelous that you hang in there. You know, a lot of people just drop out. I think you got that perseverance from a long way back, you know, that you prepared to not give up till you get it. And you've had that always in your life, so it's nice. But today I wanted to do, is there a place for individuality or the self with a little letter or the ego on our Buddhist path? And I thought this was a lovely subject but you know, when I start putting it together, then I've got so much information that again, I'm back doing, you know, with a million things, because I thought it would just be a nice short one-off one. And I want you to butt in, because this is about you. It's about your things. So I like it if you butt in. I'll just set the stage and then we'll do a lot of stuff, because I think it's really important, this subject, because as Westerners, I mean, we grow up as individuals. We grow up as our own self. And then suddenly we come into Buddhism and we're told, ditch it, you know, don't come. And we don't understand how much of that self to take in and how much to let go of, and whether we have to let go of all sorts of things. And when Westerners often let go fully of their individuality and their self, they actually become quite phony. Okay, and there can be a sense of phoniness about them. And so we have to really be careful, because I think our individuality is a unique part of us. So I want to start off with two stories which will just set the tone. There's an old story from Japan. Now, this story took place many thousands of years ago, long before there was such a thing as a mirror. This is very important for the story. Long before there was something called a mirror. And there lived a farmer and his wife. Every day, the farmer went to his fields to work. As the time went by, his wife noticed that he began to spend a long time each day looking down at one place in the field. At the same time, she heard him repeating a single phrase over and over, wondering what was so special about the place that constantly drew his gaze. She quietly followed him one day to spy on him and saw with amazement that he was looking into okay, you'll do that. He was looking into a broken glass. And so she snatched it from his hand, and looking into it, she found staring back at her the face of a beautiful woman. She became angry and upbraided him. Now I know what you've been doing all the time in the field, she shouted. You found another woman to admire. That would be quite wrong, he responded. I'm not interested in another woman. It's my deceased father in this glass that I have been concerned with. It's a very interesting story, his deceased father. She took the glass and looked in it again and again and saw the beautiful woman. Yeah, who do you see in the glass? She demanded, returning it to him. It's my father, he assured her. She chided him for his duplicity, for his refusal to admit what was clear to her eye. While they were quarreling in this way, a yogin happened along and stopped, asking them what was the matter. The wife answered him, saying, There's plainly a beautiful woman in this glass, okay, and he's telling me it's his father. That's the issue. Let me see, said the yogin, taking the glass and looking into it. Seeing a good-looking young yogin in it, he told them, there's neither a woman nor an old man in it, but rather a handsome young yogin. Don't quarrel. Anyway, this is something I need, he said, and respectfully touching the mirror to the crown of his head, he took it away with him. Now that story, a beautiful story, because, we know what a mirror is, but also what I found so interesting is that he saw his father, and it's quite a funny thing, because sometimes, my mother at the end of her life used to wear this creamy jacket. She'd never take it off. She was always cold, and she wore this creamy, one of those jackets you get at Woolies with a cream. And I've also happened to have one. I've chucked it out now, but I happen to have one, and it's so strange because sometimes when I walk past the mirror, I just get a glimpse of my mother in the mirror, when I see it like that. Such an interesting thing, because you see your parents in you, and it's a very interesting thing. So who are we? And in this particular anecdote, due to our failure to recognize the nature of our mental processes, we exteriorize, we put it outside, whatever is grasped at and apprehended an object out there, okay? We see a subject and an object. And if we realize how we do this in our lives all the time with people, so someone comes in a room and some people say, what a beautiful person that is. And other people go, I don't think so. I don't think she was beautiful at all. Just our own perceptions of everything. And we're looking here at individuality, ego, and self, all on the Buddhist path. The other story that I want to tell you is also a very interesting story. It's a true one. Okay. A man sat at a metro station in Washington, D.C., and started to play the violin. It was a cold January morning. He played 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. During that time, since it was rush hour, it was calculated that thousands of people went through the station, most of them on their way to work. 3 minutes went by, and a middle-aged man noticed there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace, stopped for a few seconds, then hurried up to meet his schedule. A minute later, the violinist received his first $1 tip. A woman threw the money in the till and without stopping continued to work. A few minutes later, someone leaned against the wall to listen to him, but the man looked at his watch and started to walk again, clearly late for work. The one who paid the most attention to the violinist was a 3-year-old boy. His mother tugged him along, but the kid stopped to listen to the violinist. Finally, the mother pushed hard, and the child continued working, turning his head all the time to listen. This action was repeated by several other children. All the parents, without exception, forced them to move on. In the 45 minutes that the musician played, only 6 people stopped and stayed for a while. After about 20 gave him money but continued to walk at their normal pace. He collected $32. When he finished playing and the silence took over, nobody noticed it, no one applauded, and nor was there any recognition. No one knew that this violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the best violinists in the whole world. He played one of the most intricate pieces ever written on a violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before his playing in the subway, Joshua Bell sold out a theater in Boston, and the seat's average price was a few $100s, and it was absolutely sold out. Okay, this is a real story. Joshua Bell played incognito in the metro station, was organized by the Washington Post as part of a social experiment about perception, taste, and priorities of people. The outlines were, in a commonplace environment at an inappropriate hour, do we perceive beauty? Do we stop to appreciate it? Do we recognize the talent in an unexpected context? Are we so involved and caught up in the ways of ourselves that we can't even see ourselves or who we really are? Yet it's all there. We haven't stopped to see. And I asked the question, are we so geared in our external routines that all we've got time and true perception for is our deluded perceptions? And this is a very, very, very interesting story, because it tells you actually the farcical nature of people and what we do with our identities. Now, can you imagine if they put in the newspaper, Joshua Bell is going to play in the subway? I mean, nobody would have gotten to work. Everybody would have crowded around, listened, cheered, appreciated his intricate music. We don't. It's all social media, social things, perceptions, deluded perceptions, how we see ourselves, how we see the world. And when you look at these stories, it's a very interesting question to ask ourselves. Is there a place for individuality, self, or ego on our Buddhist path? Which is what I'm asking. Bern, if you've got that self-image cartoon, have you got it? If your self-image is like this, I used to use this when I was always teaching on self-perception and all of that. And so I found it. So here it is. If your social self-image is like this, we have temporarily lost your image. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you've had a really bad night and everything, you actually look at your image and you think, oh my God, I've gotten so old. I've gotten this, I've gotten that. I was thinking to myself today that as I was going through life, thanks, Bern, as I was going through life, just to make us all think of it, I was thinking to myself, I actually never thought I would get old. You know, somehow in my perception, it was the next generation that got old. Not me, not us, but now we in that next generation. So how do we hang on to the identities that we had? Now, James Lowe does a very interesting answer in a question, and I wrote it down so that I could give it to you. I'm just putting all these possibilities, and then I'm going to go into what the Buddha wrote about, what the Buddha said about self, what individuality is in psychology, what Jung said about individuality and the big self, and all of these questions, which is what I really want to come across, because yes, we definitely have some kind of a self. And yes, I think it is important in our Western culture that we don't just submit it and don't have any individuality and go into doing exactly what we taught. I could never be like that in any way or any form. I have to have my individuality, even if I'm looking at Tibetan Buddhism. Now, James Lowe was answering questions, and one of the questions someone asked, and I thought it's quite nice, he gets his groups to send questions by emails, and then he does a whole question and answer session. I'd love to do that with all of you. But someone asked, you keep quoting, it is what it is. He said, and the question is, how do we see things that are as they are when we've got such distorted perception? So he said, this is how he answered it. We have to take the position of a very open view. And then that view never stays with us. So it goes away. We come back to what we were always doing. And then we go back to the view again. We try and keep on seeing that whole huge view. He says, where all things are emptiness, sounds are emptiness, mind is emptiness, full of possibility, not dualistic, okay? And always remember in Buddhism, when you see the word ness next to a word, it changes the whole concept in terms of the Buddhist interpretation. So if you see empty, it could be nihilistic. If you see emptiness, the ness means full of possibility. And I'm going to come on to identity, identityless, and identitylessness. Okay, because that ness changes the whole concept and makes it full of possibility. So James Lowe said, like our skin and our clothes, he says, we wear our skin in a different way to our clothes. While wearing clothes in a day, they like a second skin. And it's quite interesting because a lot of women say to me, oh, you don't see my weight because of the way I dress. You don't see this because of what I do to hide it. You don't see that because, so people are very aware of the clothing and the makeups and everything else. He says, while wearing clothes in a day, they're like our second skin. People perceive us according to how we look, not our intrinsic present. They are an identity. Our clothes are an identity, how we negotiate through the world, in this relative world. He says, in the evening, we take our clothes off. And the one with the clothes was not me, yet I thought it was me. We stripped off to naked awareness in our minds. But as long as the clothes and identity are grasped at as me, and when we're naked, we quickly cover our private parts so no one could see. If anybody walked in the room, we'd quickly cover our private part. He says, but Kunta Zampo, the primordial Buddha, is depicted as naked. He hasn't got any clothes on very often. He's naked. And he says, it's our ego that doesn't like to be naked, doesn't like it. It covers itself over and presents itself in a way that it wants to, how it thinks people would like, how, whether you're pleasing people or you're disagreeing with them, we present ourselves in this way. And we often like to be defined by our professions, our lives, our roles, our wealth, our poverty. We define by all of those things. But those aren't our true self. These are just the roles we play. He says our ego or our dualistic self cannot encounter itself. It cannot look naked. When he said that, I thought, this is the reason why I'm feeling such a compulsion to teach the psychology into the Buddhism, because people are a little bit lost with all their wounds and all their stuff that I'm doing in the night. And he says the ego, the dualistic, cannot encounter itself. It needs clothes. Empty to the ego means nothing. Nihilistic, that's what it means. He says clothes, like thoughts, we identify with them. We define ourselves by them. And he says, it really is as it is. It's not a dualistic cognition. It's got to be looked at nakedly. Now, how? I thought that was a very interesting thing that he said, and I quickly wrote it down so I could remember what he was said, because sometimes I remember half and not all of it. But how do we get to look at ourselves nakedly? I mean, just think about yourself. Think about how you've changed over the years. Think about your different perceptions. Think about how people see you, what you've done with your life, how you've changed so much. You never thought you'd come to this point, how you were before and how ashamed you sometimes feel about the way you were. Just think about all these things, and we're going to do a meditation on it just now. But it's really important. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything, but I want to just come to give you what Rob Priest defines individuality versus individuation, which is a term Jung coined. And individuation is very, very close to the Buddhist idea of your true nature, of your enlightened part of you. And to me, I mean, I always knew when I was studying Jung that Jung knew much more than he gave way. I mean, he wrote the foreword in the Tibetan book of Living and Dying, which is amazing. He wrote that, And, you know, he had amazing insight, and he spoke about these terms, but he looked for psychological terms. But Rob Priest has taken individuality and individuation and really compared them, which I want to do with you, which is really important. So he said, it's important to see the difference between these two things. I'm going to stop in a moment and give you a chance to say. But individuation, which is Jung's term, actually goes beyond individuality completely, but it does not have a trace of ego. Now, how do we know what's individuality and what's ego? Because it's ego and it's grasping, it's hiding, it's clothing of itself. It's not being exposed to nakedness that trips us up, not our unique individuality or little self, which is actually fresh and refreshing on a spiritual path. And I just want to say, we can't become Tibetans practicing Tibetan Buddhism. We're not Tibetan. We're never going to be Tibetan. We're never going to fully understand and incorporate their culture. So we have a different culture and a different way, and we trained in believing in a self. Now, I want to give you what Dzongsa says about Tibetan Buddhism when he's teaching, because it's really important. Because just to say to you that I remember being on Holy Hour, and Lama Yeshe Rinpoche had these two disciples. One was Melanie, and one was another girl who was on the island with me. I'm not going to mention any names. Some of you might know her, or whatever the case is. But she was very dedicated and very devoted. And she used to go like this. Whenever she saw him, she used to go, you know, like the Tibetans do. She used to do about 20 bows, okay? And when she left him in a room, you know, you're supposed to not turn your back and walk out like we do. So she would always go like this as she went down in the back of the room. And I used to look at her and laugh, because I used to think, where did this come from? A Tibetan incarnation, an Eastern incarnation? Because of course, when I go before a very great master, I always go like that once. That's what I do, and that's enough, you know. And I learned with Taisitu Rinpoche, you know, that Taisitu is far more interested in our psychology, in our craziness, in our Western ideas than he is in us trying to follow a path of, you know, Tibetan Buddhism. I mean, we never were like that. And if we began to understand what the practices were about, we would change our mind completely. We don't understand. That's why we just follow whatever they're doing. I remember the first time I heard the music at Sammy Ling, I nearly freaked out of my brain because I'd never heard, you know, drumming and clanging and everything, you know. That's how they are. But I mean, we're not them. We're different. So I don't know if anybody wants to say, then I want to tell you what Dzongsa said about it. But I'm trying to throw in a whole lot of things that makes you, you know, that makes you think about it and makes you really look at, what do I want in this Buddhist path? What do I want? Who do I want to be? Anyone say anything or comment? Gail, you seem like...
I also have to always comment. Mel, don't you think it's weird that we give it a label Tibetan Buddhism, that there's a label Tibetan?
Okay.
That's number one. Vajrayana, if you want to, whatever you want to, Dzogchen, it's a path. I mean, it's a vehicle, but why does it have to be Tibetan?
Yeah, doesn't.
To label. And there's a quote that a rabbi, which had an impact on me, because I think we always wanted to be who everybody wanted you to be, and peer pressure, and that still goes on. And I was never like that. I'm a lot like you in a lot of ways. And I continue that way. And I think when I'm with people, it's very hard with me. With people, I play a game. But there was a quote I'm going to try and think of it. If I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I. And no, you must look it up. And you are not you. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I and you can talk. So I think in this group, we're genuine. I am I, you are you. And I think I sort of got the quote right. I'm not too sure. It's quite complicated, but that's what really at the time it really hit home, because that's what I realized. Most people aren't I or you. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
It's like I am not I when I'm going to a Friday night supper and I'm forced to go. So I play the game but I know, like in front of you, I am I, and I know you are you. Even if you go into Copper Colored Mountain, I'm going straight to Dewa Shen. But I'm saying,
Yeah.
you know what I think you know what I'm trying to say. Okay, that's my passing in.
No, it's beautiful what you're saying. And I think it's so true, because that's what we're looking at now. And I don't care if we take a couple of sessions, because I think there's so much beautiful material to teach on this, and it keeps coming to me. And I think it's something we have to really look at very deeply. And if I am I and you are you, and none of us are being ourselves, then I don't know, are we playing this role? And is there, I mean, it's such a funny thing, what you're saying, but it's 100% true.
And it's a Rabbi Menachem, some Mandel or something. Bernice, you can look it up and find the quote. Yeah. But it's really quite profound. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and the thing is about the I is separate, whereas the individuation, the individuality is not separate. It's just a unique way of responding to things, but it's not separate and different to you. So when you're going through something terrible, I mean, I often cry when people come to me with terrible tragedies, and I've had other people comment and say, well, that's not very professional. And then I go, well, what's professional? I mean, I remember when I had 3 mothers who'd lost their only 2 children, and they were howling their eyes out. What would the eye say to them? The eye's got nothing to say to them except cry with them and put my heart in theirs. And that's what I felt to do many, many times when people come to me with these terrible things. How can I be this professional person who does it, who's not taking on what they're going through, is also going, I'm going through it as well, And so it's really an important thing to feel that and to find an identity, but not an identity that is limiting, which I'm coming to teach you about in a moment. Anyone else?
Okay.
Yes, I have a lovely story, and it's a true life story, and it happened in my mum's space. We went to a little restaurant in her neighborhood the other day for coffee, and she was telling, she chatted to the car guard who'd been there for like 14 years. And my mum said to me afterwards, you won't believe what a wonderful man this man is. A friend of my mum's who doesn't have transport walks past there most days, and she stops off and has a coffee and a muffin. And this particular day, as she was walking past, she realized she didn't have her purse with her, but she had some change. So she dug around in her pocket and checked out, and she saw that she didn't have enough money for a cup of coffee. So she started walking on, and the car guard came up to her and he said, why aren't you stopping for coffee today? And she said, because I haven't got enough money. So he said, no. You sit down, you will have your coffee and your muffin, and I will pay. And which she duly did. And the next day she walked past and she wanted to pay him. He said, please, no, take this with my love. And I thought, isn't that the most amazing thing? We all have this perception that car guards are sort of down on their luck, people who haven't got anything better to do, and this is the only job they can get, and you know, they living a hand-to-mouth existence. But this man was so kind. He was
so beautiful. And what a lesson he taught her. How, you know, jobs, they watch everybody and what they're doing, and they see the people as they go on a day-by-day basis. It's amazing. What a beautiful story. And that's true. And I've got to say that in Black culture, I mean, I know there are also some awful things and corruption and stealing and everything, but in Black culture, they really do have a, you know, an empathy and a compassion for each other, I've got to say. It's just
they
unfortunate.
do.
Yeah, I think our culture has actually made them less like that. You know, the cultural influence that we've had has made them want more and want fancy houses. They never ever used to be like that, you know. So I don't know, we've probably done them really a lot of harm as well, you know, in terms of our cultures and their cultures, really. Anyone else? That's a beautiful story. I love it. And what's his identity? His identity is unique. And yet we would never imagine that he would come and offer you that, you know, and he'll get his reward double fold, you know, 1,000,000 times. People will come and give him a whole lot of things. Such a beautiful story. Anyone else want to say anything on what I've been giving you? Okay, well, let's just go on. So Zongsa, what Zongsa said, and it's interesting, Corin, you'll find it, is he said the biggest mistake of Tibetan lamas in the West is that they introduced the culture of Tibet into Buddhism. He said lots of people couldn't relate to it, especially the youth in the future. And that's a real big problem to me, because I don't see lots of young people coming into this that we're doing. We don't find a lot of young people. And what is it? Are we not adapting it for the culture of young people today, which is really quite an important thing? And my dilemma, you know, the dilemma I think we have is that when I immediately came into Tibetan Buddhism, I just related straight away. And so do lots of older generations. And maybe we got acclimatized visiting monasteries and participating maybe from previous lives. But when I do the practice, I enjoy it in Tibetan, providing I've read the English translation and I know what I'm actually doing it. And that English will have its own energy over time. But Zongsa spoke about the culture actually being not synonymous with the actual practice, which is so interesting. He said it's not synonymous with the whole practice. And he said later on in the talk, he said it's very interesting, because if you look at the deities in Vajrayana, like we were doing Guru Rinpoche this morning, he says, the question on the Vajrayana deities for Western culture, he says, isn't that confusing? He says his book answers this, his book, The Guru Drinks Bourbon. I've ordered it, it's coming now. He says it's got a lot of iconography, which is, you know, the deities and everything. He says, but fundamentally, at its base, the deities have not got anything to do with Tibetan culture. Isn't that interesting? They haven't got anything to do with Tibetan culture. He says the deity is the union. Now listen carefully. The deity is the union of emptiness and appearance. So yes, there's an appearance, but the appearance is emptiness, full of possibility. And that's what a deity shows. The book, The Guru Drinks Bourbon, yeah, that would be nice, because I think it's a good book. But what I want to say to all of you is that the union of appearance and emptiness is something we can take for ourselves. We are the union in our individuality of emptiness and appearance. Yes, there's something, you see Melanie, you relate to Melanie, but there's also emptiness, which is full of possibility. So the deities that I relate to, they're not external, they're my characteristics that are symbolically in the iconography given for that particular deity. So Guru Rinpoche always appeared in millions of different forms, sometimes in peaceful forms, sometimes in wrathful forms. Does that mean that's his identity? No. That means his individuality can be in many, many different situations, but there's a base. As Zongsa says, it's there, but it's not there. That's the real deity, the brilliant tantric wisdom, and we don't understand it. When we do Tara, Guru Rinpoche and everything, and we're waiting to find out, I often think about that too. Karen, maybe you've also thought about it. I mean, we want to become that deity. Does it mean that we become that deity when we actually see it? Or does it mean we become the deity? Because they always say to see the deity is when you really recognize you become the deity in your practice. But actually, for me, it doesn't work like that. I look at my Taras every single morning and I think, green Tara, you are who I always wanted to be. You're quick, you're beautiful, you got the wisdom of perfected action, you move rapidly and things like that, which is me. But now, as I got older, the white Tara is more meaningful for me because she's quieter, she's purer, she's a wish-fulfilling wheel. So you incorporate these things into your own individuality in this life. And when we understand it, then we're able to, I think most people don't understand this. I really think most people don't understand this. And I think it's really important that when you're doing practices, that you think of the combination of appearance and emptiness. Ness means full of possibility. So when we look at identity, usually in our Western culture, identity means a particular identity. So if I say my identity is Melanie, and then I do a survey with all of you and ask you, what do you think Melanie's identity is? You're each going to have a different opinion anyway. You're not going to see me in the same way. Some might say, she talks too much. She uses her hand, I love her, I don't like her so much, everybody's going to have a different opinion of you. But the individual identity is a fixed thing. Identityless means like a chicken running around without its head. It doesn't know who it is. We don't know who we are. When people are identityless, means they haven't got any direction, they don't know who they are. But now, go to the third word, identitylessness. That wasn't even in my notes when I was writing this. It just came from my prayers this morning when I saw it. And I was thinking, identitylessness means you playing a role in whatever you're doing, and that might be very unique. But it's full of potential, full of possibility, full of everything. It's not restricted to an identity. Because think about when we come to the end of our lives, and this identity starts fading. And the people we were with start fading. I mean, it's unbelievable when you think about it. And then we lost. We are like identityless. We don't know who we are. It's not like that at all. As soon as we leave this, we understand it goes on. And when the Buddha taught no self, he just said yourself, which is you, the you and the I, yourself is made up of interdependent causes that have emptiness at their base. Form, your form and the form of everything, your feelings, your perceptions, your habits, and your ordinary consciousness. What's ordinary consciousness? It's 5 sense consciousnesses, then a mind consciousness that labels whatever we say, then a klesha consciousness, which gives your opinion. I like it, I hate it, it makes me anxious, it makes me, that's the klesha. And then your alaya consciousness, or the substrate in which all your imprints are. Now think about it. All those 7, all those 6 go away, and we left with, 7 go away, and we left only with the imprints from that lifetime. So why are we hanging on to the lifetime? Most of the knowledge that we gain and glean, most of the intellectual knowledge goes away when we die. No point to it. By the time we come back, it's already changed. I think most of the things I learned as a child have changed in the world. Don't you think so? I mean, how my mother taught me to behave is probably not even worth it today. You know, it's probably not even so today. There's so much of this, and I want to teach you the individuation, which is really important. So I'm going to finish with a paragraph. We'll do a meditation, and then we'll go on to Rob Priest. So Jung spoke differently. He spoke about the little self, which I've just been talking about, but he also spoke about the self with a capital S, which was different. And you know, Rob Priest says that self with a capital letter equates very much with Buddha nature. But, you know, can you imagine if Jung had taught, this is your Buddha nature, you know, people, he would have been thrown out of the psychiatry and psychological society if he said, this is your awakened nature. But he spoke about the self, which actually equates with the Buddha nature, something much greater than our little self and our little ego, our dualistic human mind. So to be an individual with unique individuality is amazing. Emaho. To know that individuality, that uniqueness is how we are in this lifetime is absolutely wonderful. But to grasp at it and go to ego grasping becomes a pathology. Why do we grasp on something that would just express itself in a most beautiful way? We grasp because we are afraid. We do the me and you because we are afraid. Why? Because ego needs to secure its ground. We always need to feel secure in our environments. We need to feel secure about how other people feel it. We need to protect ourselves. We need to really look at that, whereas our awakened nature just uses our individuality to express its compassionate activity. Isn't that interesting? It's as soon as we grasp onto the solidity of the ego that it gets lost. But if we are selfless and we've got no ego and we've got no individuality in us, we also lost. And in this world, people will really take advantage of you. They really will. You've got to understand that people will take advantage of you if you don't know how to hold your own. So I want to do Rob Priest's stuff and look at how we can do this. How can we give up the ego, the grasping, and be an individual? because Tibetan Buddhism, you know, in Eastern culture, not so much anymore, it's changing. But like if you were an individual with your own ideas and unique, you were quite an outcast. You did things in a particular way, and that's how everybody was brought up. And it was quite safe, but I think a lot of people got repressed. I know, for example, that I was counseling an Eastern European woman through tragic circumstances, and she found it absolutely impossible to express her feelings. She found it so difficult to express her pain because in communist culture in Eastern Europe, you were never allowed to have your own feelings. And I felt this was so sore. And it's interesting. I'll tell you an interesting other story that Annie Lamo, you know, her father, she was in South Africa just before they left. And she told us her father was very, very ill. And so would we pray for her? And we had him on our list. He's now subsequently passed away about 2 weeks ago or anything. And when I saw her, now she's a Western person who's been in an Eastern non-individuality for a very long time. So I said to her, when I saw her the other day, I said to her, you know, if you really want to sit down and talk about your memories of your dad and how you feel and that you've missed your whole family and you've missed the burial and you've missed everything in it, I said, you know that I'm here and you could talk about it. Now, it's so interesting because she sent me a text after that to actually say, well, you know, everything's impermanent and it all passes. And after all, we need to give, you know, we need to not attach to these things. And I know that we did the prayers and that he really did well. And Lama Yeshe said he's fine. So it's really fine. Now think about that. It's such a beautiful thing to teach, I think. Nicola, you might want to comment on this because it's such a beautiful thing, or you, Bern, or anybody. You know, when you think about it, it's so interesting because you are a nun, because you are living with a master who definitely doesn't attach. I mean, he came out of this terrible, you know, going from India to Tibet. He came out of that. And I mean, never spoke about it unless we induced him to tell us what happened. It just goes away like that. But our beings are different. I know that even though I fully accepted my mother's death, I really wanted to talk about my relationship with her. Doesn't mean if I'd done a lot of bereavement that I didn't feel a lot of feelings when she died. Do you know what I'm saying? And what do you think of this? Because I found it, of course, I totally respected her for what she said. But I thought to myself, is something quelled in us with the Buddhist view? Or can we take our own individuality? I know, Nicola, you are totally an individual. You never go according to the rules, neither do I. I'm better than you, but you don't. But maybe you want to make a comment and then let's do our meditation.
No, I definitely don't follow the rules, but I mean, I can't really comment on it. I mean, I suppose I respect it in the sense that she's not putting her own needs first. Exactly. In that sense. She's not doing that typical human response that need to discuss it and talk about it, and however uncomfortable and hard that is, she's actually saying, this is my path and I'm going to do that. So I can really respect that.
So do I, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
it's hard, you know, that's the thing, it's hard for us because it's so against our normal tendencies to want to discuss it and analyze it and grasp it, not in a negative way, but grasp onto the whole process.
You tell me, if somebody went through a bereavement, it doesn't matter if the person's old and they were going to die at some point or another. Their father was old and, you know, they were going to die at some point or another. What do you feel about the fact that it's okay to have your emotions, to have what you need, and for it to dissolve, you know, and then move on with it very quickly? I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense to me, because, you know, but I do get that she's living in a real Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist community where everybody deals with things in this way. So do you, kind of thing. And so does Lama Yeshe, who she's living with morning, noon, and night, deal with it in that kind of way. But for me, I think that a lot of the reason why people can't take to the Buddhism and really live their life with it is because they have all the woundedness, all the stuff, you know, growing inside them from long ago, from now, from whatever they've gone through. And to me, it's really okay to do that and get it off. I find, you know, like my husband will sometimes say to me, well, why are you talking about this when you're the one that preaches, you know, that you let the go? I said to him, that doesn't mean to say that when I'm going through something as an individual, I like to talk it out with someone and I like to finish with it and then I move on straight away. But let's say you don't do this and you're a Westerner coming into Buddhism, I wonder where it would go. Now with her, no, she'll go boom into the practice because she lives in that environment. But for us living in this environment, if we tried to do that, we'd probably store or repress something in us. Just to think about this, everyone. You know, I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just thinking about it. Bern, do you want to say anything?
I can only talk for myself. With this, I think that I've come to treasure everything that I've received. It's become part of who I am.
Right.
And probably that's why I don't fit into my so-called society, because I'm just so different. And it's without it, I'm nothing. Without it, I don't know how you actually carry on. Sorry, I'm ill and I'm in bed.
Don't worry, gorgeous and comfortable. And I'm so pleased your camera's on so everyone can see. We're all happy for you to be in bed. Okay.
But without these teachings, without the knowledge that there's purpose and there's so much wisdom, there's so much feeding me the whole time. Without that, I wouldn't cope. Because that's all there is.
Yeah. And when you're going through what you're going through and going through it, it's really okay, because I say to Bern, okay, now it's over, move on, you know,
Then
because
comes and goes, boom.
yeah, we can do that. It's like really very, very important. Now, I don't know if you all saw what happened last week. Can I tell them what happened? Because I think it's such an amazing story.
I'll show you a photo later. Oh, no, I haven't.
You know what happened last week? Kim took a photograph. None of us saw it, only Kim. And there was Bern in her jersey was in front of. Do you remember when I showed that flower? Do you remember when I was showing that the going around, you know, the lotus and all the things? In her picture, Bern was beheaded. I mean, there, and I saw it. She sent me the picture. She had no head in the picture, and no one else saw it, not me or anyone else, but Kim saw it, and she took a photograph of it. And Bern was freaked out. She said, there I am in the picture of the video, not in the video, But in the picture, there I am, my jersey's there, and I've got no head. And I said, I thought that was amazing, because I was telling you the dream of Vajrayogini, where she chopped the head off and came and gave me the head. The head represents the head represents like the whole human, emotional, intellectual stuff. And you chop it off. That's what my curved knife is about, that Vajrayogini chops off your head so that you haven't got any of that left anymore. And so I said to her, that is your biggest lesson of this year. It's showing you, don't use your head, don't control things, chop it off and move through what you have to move through. I think it was unbelievable. She'll put the picture, can you put it onto the chat?
I can't. I didn't say. I haven't saved it onto the computer. It's on my phone. I'll try and
It's
send it.
my phone as well, but it's unbelievable.
When this is finished, I will hopefully have managed to load it onto my computer, because it was the strangest experience I've ever had.
Strange. And you know, I said, stand up to
I
the dream.
had the dream of being chopped up.
Did you? And you know that the chirp practice, which I'm going to talk a little bit about as well in talking about the individual, you know, the chirp practice, what happens in the chirp practice is you do the pawa, so you leave your physical body and you go, and then Vajrayogini takes your body and chops it all up and puts it into a mixing bowl and makes it into nectar, and then feeds all the demons. And of course, they're your demons, our demons, everybody's demons. That's what the chirp practice is about. So that's what you were going through. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So let's do a little meditation, everyone. I haven't got any way today of all the stuff I've got for you, but never mind. We'll get there. You know me, when I go, we'll get there eventually. So sit in your meditation posture. And you're breathing in and out, and in and out. As you breathe in, I want you to take in the spaciousness, the egolessness, the emptiness, full of possibility of the blue, huge sky. Breathe it in. And when you breathe out, leave all the temporary, transient, impermanent difficulties that you're going through, obstacles. Let them all breathe out into the spaciousness and watch them as they beautifully dissolve into absolute space. Let me just mute you all so we don't hear any noises of all of you. And so you're breathing in and breathing out, and you're coming to this moment, very precious moment. You're really looking at, in this moment, who am I? What am I? What have I got? What's going to happen when I finish this life? What part of me do I want to salvage? Am I solid? Am I permanent? Do I have a title? Am I known by something? Look at all your solid forms. Look at yourself walking back right to your childhood and watching yourself as a little girl. Was I cheeky, obedient? Did I follow the rules? Was I afraid, insecure? What was I like as a child? Who did I depend on mostly? Did I hang on to my mom's skirt? Was there no one? Was I the mother? Was I the father? Was I the person who had to do things? Could I trust my parents? Who am I? Watch yourself walking through the path of life, all the different things that you've been through, how you've survived so many things, how you've changed, transformed. Sometimes you are nothing like you were completely different. Sometimes you haven't grown a lot. Some parts of you stick out. I want you to see the difference between your individuality, and we're going to talk about how you individuate your individuality, how you transform it in a lot of ways. But look at your individuality and see all the things you might have overcome, you might have had to change, you might have calmed down. See yourself when you came onto a spiritual path. What did it demand of you? How much is true? How much did I fake? How much did I pretend? Back and see that you were in the right place at the right time for this incarnation. A chance to clear all the karmic imprints that you've created in your substrate consciousness. I want you to not do an intellectual assessment, but look at you, your changes, how you've transformed in a lot of ways. Maybe you look better now than you did at a much earlier age. Have a look deeply. Is that beauty that you've learned coming through, or do you hide it all the time? When you walk into a room, do people see your light? Do they ignore you pretty much? See where your spunk has got you, where your withdrawal has got you, where your criticism of yourself has got you, where you're always criticizing yourself. Have a look. Look through your life as though you were selecting out the photographs that you want to keep, those that will help you towards your true goal, your true individuation, your true Buddha nature. How many of the qualities were true, and how many were to hide all your fears, to pretend? How truthful have you been in this life? Not that you told lies, but how many times did you say to people what you think they wanted to hear? How many times did you stick up for the truth? How many times were you like the guard in the parking lot who notices what everybody does and who's willing to be there at their service in any way? How many times did you feel immense compassion in your life for all those around you? How often do you say your truth? And how often do you say what you think people want to hear from you? How fearful are you? How much grasping at everything do you do? How much holding on all the time do you do? I want you to just breathe in the spaciousness of your nature and see that if you've got that contact with your true nature, that you can be many individuals in many different things, in many different guises. That Guru Rinpoche is so many different things, never the same. He just appears in the way people want him and need him. He doesn't grasp onto any. When that is done, he moves on to the next. See what you want to be in this life. What's your aspiration? How much are you filling that aspiration already? If not, can you open enough to let the spaciousness and the trueness of who you really are shine through you? Think about, ponder how many times in life somebody asked you something and you knew you didn't have the answer, but the answer just came. How many times in life did you let things just happen through you, not from you? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves and ponder the answers. Just to show you how we all look at different things. Bern, I don't know if you have that quote that I gave you, the professor teaching English. It would be really good to do it if you've got it. Do you have that quote? Just put it on. So this was an English professor. So interesting that the men wrote differently than the women. An English professor wrote the words, "Woman without her man is nothing," on the blackboard and directed the students to punctuate it correctly. The men wrote, "Woman without her man, comma, is nothing." The woman wrote, "Woman, exclamation mark, without her, comma, man is nothing." I think that was so beautiful. I just photographed it because I thought, just to show you what we're emphasizing, how it is for us, what we're emphasizing in our lives, how we fight for ourselves and everything else. And Rob Priest, in his Individuality versus Individuation, we'll just do a few minutes, he says, when Eastern teachers first encounter Western students, one aspect of our character must become immediately prominent. He says we are determinedly individualistic. He says in the West, we pride ourselves on individuality. From the moment we begin to engage in the world, there are expectations and pressures on us to be able to express our own particular personal character and capacities. During our education, this tendency is deepened, he says, because we compared to others. Look how good your work is. Look how bad your work is. We compared. We measured and encouraged. And he says self-expression and creativity are generally rewarded and applauded. And as children, we rapidly grow to understand that as we move from the family out to the world around, we expect to become increasingly self-reliant. Now, he uses self this, self that, self the other. Whereas in the Buddhist terminology, when they say self-liberate, it means it liberates of itself. But here, He's talking about you yourself, self-reliant. Okay. He says, ultimately, there will be little help in the fiercely competitive environment of work and relationships. He says, to grow up in the West, we must become psychologically robust enough to cope with the alienation that accompanies our independence. So interesting. We must be able to cope with the demands of a relatively hostile, competitive, and insecure world. He says individuality is a way of living, and it's also a way of trying to be visible and different in a culture that really enjoys it when people are visible and different, especially today. We try and express ourselves in a uniquely individual way. In the creative world, the more unique we are, innovation is absolutely everything if you're trying to do it. And he says, this approach stands in marked contrast to the prevailing disposition within Eastern cultures. He says, in Tibetan, the term Ran So Wa means self-created or innovation. That's a derogatory expression. Because if you do things the way you want to, it's just implying you made it up, and therefore it has no authenticity or authority. Such an interesting difference, because truly, sometimes when I talk to some of these lamas and they tell you, you know, this is the way we do it, it's got to be pure. Now, I understand it's got to be pure. But does that mean you've got to go in a box? You've got to do it exactly as the next person asked you to do it. Individuality will have its positive and negative consequences. It will bring us a capacity for self-sufficiency, self-reliance, self-expression, self-motivation, and a relatively stable sense of self-identity. Now, all these might be seen as ego-oriented in Eastern culture. So our sense of self-identity leads to innovation and change and the revaluation of old convention. But conversely, it will engender insecurity, self-preoccupation, competitiveness, and all the narcissistic failings that we suffer, which is so different to what we're learning. It can lead to an overemphasis on the need to prove oneself and an arrogant self-determination, And we will inevitably bring this individualistic disposition, which can appear to stand in clear contrast to the Eastern view in our spirituality. This is so important. You know, I have such a laugh because when I put on the YouTube of Dzongsa Khyentse, I have a real laugh. Because when he's teaching in the East, like in Japan or Korea or wherever else he goes and teaches all over, you know, when the people come for question time, they come and they go, good morning, Rinpoche. Rinpoche, thank you very much for your teaching. Rinpoche, I have a question. And they ask quite a common question. When he teaches in Vancouver, in Canada, when he teaches in America, I mean, these people come up and they ask these weird questions and they challenge him and they ask him things about what they're doing, about it doesn't make sense to them, this, that. I have such a chuckle when I see an Eastern audience and a Western audience. It's hysterical. Now, the question I'm putting to you today, and we can stop now, because I've got lots and lots of different things to really teach you, many, many different things. But the question is, do we need to give up that cheeky, spunky being to be successful in our Buddhist practice? You know, when I went to Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, when I was doing Mahamudra, when I was doing Dzogchen, it just came so easily to me when I was doing Mahamudra and you needed to do this and this and this and this. And I went to him grumbling like anything. And I said to him, I can't enjoy this. I can't do it and everything. he whispered to me, he said, don't tell anybody in here, I'm telling you. He said, neither can I. That was my best that ever happened to me. Because he was also a bit of a rebel. He's a bit different now. In his old age, he's become a little bit different, and he's quieter and more withdrawn and everything. But I mean, I could check out with him when he said to me, in your next life, you don't have all these children's, grandchildren's, husbands, all the rest of it. He says, you come, you shave your head, you come and be a nun with me. And I go, never, never. He says to me, what you mean never? And this was long ago. I said, never. I just can never be a nun. I would corrupt all the nuns so quickly. I said, you can't give me rules and regulations. I said to him, I must get to the essence of what it's about. And yes, I'm very excited, but I said to him, I'm passionate and I do all these things. You can't put me in and say, you must do this at this time and you must do that at that time. And I said, so lots of people won't like me when I teach, but that's okay. I've got to teach what feels very alive for me and never stop doing that, even if I'm 90 and still around, which I probably won't be. I'll probably be burnt out by then. But it's interesting. And I want to give you Rob Priest's stuff. He's got so many interesting things that when we go on that inner calling, how do we incorporate that individuality without losing sight of the purity of whatever we are learning? It's a very fine art for us in the West. So think about it. And, we'll really, really, really talk about it next time and discuss it. And by all means, if any of you want to make comments or write comments, you're very welcome to do it on my email or my WhatsApp, and then I'll bring it up next time. Because
sorry, can I just say something? Do you not think that in the West, we just undisciplined and unruly? In the East, they're far more disciplined and they are organized and they have a different level of dedication and devotion, I believe, to what we have, because we've had a lot more freedom and we're a little bit wild. We savages.
Yeah, it's 100% true. But sometimes I just want to say that the what can I say, the converse of that, okay, because you're 100% right. But the converse of that is, are they sometimes repressed? Because they've been brought up like that, but they can't express it with passion. And are they sometimes repressed? Because it's an interesting thing, because what you're saying is absolutely true. And they really have that. But I worry about them being a little bit repressed and splitting off what they might have liked. Maybe they look at us and they think, why can't I be? Because when they come up and ask the questions are straightforward and and they're respectful and everything. And ours are sometimes, oh my God, when you listen to some of the questions in these big audiences, I'm amazed that people have got the guts to actually even ask those questions. But it's an interesting thing, because we are what we are. We can't take our learning and do it. And when Taisitu says to me, why don't you come back next time, he tells me, as into a Tibetan Buddhist family, he says, and go to the universities for the 14 years and do the studies. And I went to him, can't you just help me to attain the rainbow body? Because can't you help me? Because I 14 years, with debates, when they debate, I want to say, get on with it. But I have no right to do that because they're debating very seriously. But it's just that I get the answer to the debate. So when they're debating and debating and debating, it's sort of using the intellect a lot to try and understand it. And it's very necessary. But I can't do it, Gail. So yeah, you're right. Let's see. Let's dedicate. And then I'll stay if anybody wants to say anything to me. I've got lots of stories and lots of things in this subject matter. So I hope you enjoyed that. So let's dedicate to all this merit of this. May everybody be able to attain enlightenment, and may they really have their darkness, may they confront their darkness. May this world full of degeneration come to enlightenment, and may some of what we've done today be the merit to achieve that. And may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Sonam die damje zipane topne nepe dranam pamshene jeganachi balap dropaye sipe sole doa do warsho.